Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 exclusive interview. I'm Shireen Bhan. We join you from the capital to talk about a sector that is no stranger to turbulence. But in the eye of a storm currently is Vistara, the airline that has seen a fair degree of disruption, over 100 flights being cancelled over the last few days on account of issues with pilots. Pilots are concerned about compensation as the merger process with Air India, the other Tata aviation company, is underway. There are also concerns on rostering and scheduling. Letters have been written to Tata Group Chairman N. Chandrasekaran by pilots associations, getting the Tata Group to address some of these concerns. There was a town hall just 24 hours ago where the Vistara CEO did try to take on board concerns that pilots had raised. To understand what the flight path looks like going forward, joining me now on the CNBC TV 18 exclusive interview is the CEO of Vistara, Vinod Kannan. Mr. Kannan, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. To start with, what is the current level in terms of disruption? How much have you had to rationalize operations? You do about 300 to 350 flights every day. What is the current quantum that you're flying?
Thank you, Shireen, firstly, for having me. And before I start off, I want to apologize to all our customers who were affected quite badly over the weekend. It's definitely not Vistara is known for, and we hope that we will bounce back, and we are bouncing back. So to give you an idea, yes, we used to operate about 350 flights a day. We are shy of that by about 5%. So we are short by about 20 flights or so every day. But these flights have been cancelled mainly to provide a little bit more buffer. And it's not for any other reasons other than that.
So, Vinod, let's understand what has led to this crisis at Vistara. Why have pilots chosen to go on sick leave en masse? How many pilots have actually come to the management raising concerns over compensation? Let's break this down. How much of this is compensation related? How much of it is related to scheduling and rostering issues? What is at the heart of this current crisis?
So, Shireen, I just have to, again, state this unequivocally. The reason why we had this whole situation over the weekend, let me break it down for you. We've been growing pretty rapidly. Over the last month, we've taken delivery of 3 or so additional aircraft. And what happens is every month we come up with rosters to crew these flights for pilots and cabin crew. We did have a roster for the month of March as well, but unfortunately it was quite stretched, which basically meant that we did not have enough buffer or enough resilience in the network. And what also happened was through the month of March, we had a few operational disruptions. For example, we had bird strikes, we had some aircraft down for maintenance, and we also had some ATC delays. Now, when such things happen, it affects the rosters of the pilots, and the rosters get broken up. And since we did not have enough buffer or standby, we were not able to crew the flights fast enough. And then it started snowballing because we had to wait for the next set of crew to come in and so on and so forth. So the point that you made about sick leave and pilots calling in sick, I have to say that actually towards the end of the financial year in March, sick leave for us usually goes up because that's the end of the year. And that is a normal trend. We had planned for that. Maybe it was slightly higher than that, but that was not the main reason why this happened. I think on a planning level, we should have done better. We were a lot more aggressive, perhaps, than we should have been. And I also want to state that actually, when we were going through this crisis over the last weekend, we had to reach out to some of our pilots.
I'm interrupting you just to get clarity on what you've said, Vinod. You're essentially saying that the pilots going on leave is part of what happens at the year end. This was not a sign of protest. Some degree may have been, but pilots going on sick leave was something that the management had already factored in, but clearly not planned as effectively as it ought to have. So this was not a mark of protest. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what I'm saying is that there is, we are aware that there's certain, feedback and certain concerns, whether it's with rostering or whether it's with contracts, and I'll come to that later. But I think fundamentally for us, we should have planned better, and my team takes responsibility for this. It's a situation that should and could have been avoided. And as I said, there are pilots who stepped in fact, who canceled their leave and came in to operate some of these flights, and I'm grateful for that. But at the end of the day, I think this was something that should have been managed better. The amount of sick leave that is being mentioned in various media reports, I again have to clarify that it's nowhere significantly higher than what usually happens during this part of the year.
Okay, so, let's address the compensation issue now. And I want to understand, you have what, about 900 pilots on board at this point in time? And correct me if that number is different. What is the percentage of pilots who are unhappy with the change in compensation on account of the merger process with Air India? What is the size of the problem that we're talking about?
So we have about 1,000 pilots. It's just slightly higher than what you said. From what we see and what we've kind of looked at, we believe that majority of the pilots, as long as they fly the same number of hours as they're flying now, will be better off in the new contract. Having said that, I know that it's not about averages. It's not about medians. We have to talk about each and every pilot, and each and every staff matters. And therefore, we know that there are certain sets of pilots who perhaps have some apprehension and some concerns, and we are aware of this. We've actually reached out to these pilots. In fact, as you said, I had a town hall with them as well. It's not the first time we're doing this. We've done it before, even during the transition to the new contract. We continue to do this. We will hear out, and we have been hearing out their concerns, and we are working to see what we can do to, make this better. So it's an ongoing process. There are certain sections of pilots who have raised concerns. I also have to say that there are different levels of pilots, from senior commanders to first officers and junior first officers. So across various areas, depending on how much each pilot flies, there's different kind of impact, which is what we are working out now. And we'll be in touch with the pilots to get back to them and answer their questions.
So, when you talk about the fact that there is an acknowledgement of the issue, and you're trying to address the problem. So what are the options that you're considering? Because the challenge is that you're moving now from 70 hours of guaranteed pay down to 40 hours, which is what has caused some consternation with certain sections of the pilot community at Vistara. So how do you address that? What are you likely to change, if anything at all? Because there have been, letters by the HR department at Vistara that have gone public, where essentially you're telling pilots that, look, either you accept these contracts or there's no recourse for you. Is that the way forward?
So just to clarify again, the questions or the communication that you're talking about was essentially to clarify that if pilots do not sign up to the new contract, they will not be transitioned into it, and therefore into the merged entity. But let's go back to the question that you're asking. There are few sets of concerns, or two broad sets of concerns that pilots have had. One is around rostering, around scheduling, and about how they operate their flights. And on this aspect, rostering is something that is always quite contentious. There are various sections of pilots with various lifestyles. There are some who have families who prefer to stay at their home base. There are others who are younger who prefer to travel out and be outside for much longer periods of time. And of course, we can't have different systems for each set of pilot. So in fact, we were one of the first airlines in the country to introduce an automated system where pilots could bid for what kind of lifestyles they want. If someone wants to go on a flight, say from Delhi to Bombay and then come back, they could assign this, and they could indicate this as their lifestyle, which is preferred. So having done all this, we know that there is still room for improvement, and we are in discussion and constant dialogue with our pilots. In fact, we're going to have another town hall where we're going to ask them what they would like to see with the rostering system and how we can improve this. And therefore, based on that, we will take a cue, and that's why the rosters for May, we hopefully will incorporate some of this feedback that the pilots will have. So that's the first aspect in terms of scheduling and rostering. Around the second aspect, which is around the contract, the new contract, based on the average amount of hours that we fly today, which is around the numbers that we're talking about, which is 70 to 75 hours, we believe that the majority of the pilots should be better off. But yes, there would be circumstances or situations where perhaps certain groups of pilots may have some apprehensions around this. And for these pilots, we'll have to see what we can do in order to make this transition slightly easier for them. So that's something we're open to, and that's something that we're discussing with the pilots as well.
Vinod, I want to raise the issue of the two pilots association, the Air India Indian Commercial Pilots Association and the Indian Pilots Guild, writing to Tata Group Chairman N. Chandrasekaran. Now, a whole host of issues, including what we just spoke of, being raised in that letter to the Tata Sons chairman, but also saying things like, the culture amounts to pilots being treated as bonded labor, that this is not an isolated incident, that there is a systemic problem at place. Now, you're almost a decade, of Vistara's existence flying here in India. What do you believe has led to things getting to this pass where you actually have two associations writing, talking about systemic issues and talking about pilots being treated as bonded labor in their words?
At least as far as Vistara is concerned, the rostering system and the rostering practices that we've had haven't changed much over at least the last 5 to 6 years. Yes, we've been flying more, we've been flying our pilots more, and the utilization is higher, which also means that the pilots are to some extent stretched a little bit more. But broadly and fundamentally, it's kind of a similar rostering practices of systems. Having said this, I think there is definitely scope for us to hear more from the pilots. There's scope for us to adjust this based on the feedback that we get from pilots, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And having looked at the various options that we have, definitely we believe that the rostering system and the rostering practices or the rostering mechanism that we have is something that is quite fair. But obviously, we'll need to take into account feedback from our pilots to see how we can improve that further.
Vinod, I want to understand from you, you have 1,000 pilots at this point in time. You've got about 70 aircraft in your fleet. Is there a need to look at bringing more pilots on board? Is that an option that you're considering? I mean, you have got some relief from the government with the DGCA deferring the fatigue norms, and that has been deferred for now, which is something that all airlines were seeking from the government, that relaxation. But given where you find your situation at this point in time, do you believe that you will need to hire more? And will you?
We do, we need to, and we will. So it's an ongoing process. We are looking to hire more pilots. We are also looking to train more pilots who are there in the system. And at the same time, while this might take a little bit of time, that's precisely the reason why we've had to have this situation of scaling back just a little bit, like I spoke at the head of the show, by 5 to 7%, so that we can create that buffer, not just for operational resilience, but also to perhaps provide a slightly better kind of roster for the existing pilots.
Again, I just want to understand this curtailing of operations that you just explained to us you've had to do to try and provide some buffer within the system at this point. How long is this likely to continue? When do you believe you'll be able to go back to full capacity and normal operations? How long do you expect the disruptions to last?
So a couple of points on this. Most of the disruptions that affected our passengers very, very badly over the last weekend were because the cancellations were made either on the same day or for the next day, which is never good because a person turns up at the airport and then is told that the flight is cancelled. So apart from that, from the 3rd of April onwards, most of the cancellations have been made at least 2 to 3 days in advance. That process continues. In fact, for now, we've made these cancellations up to the 10th of April. Over this weekend, we hope to close the entire operations for the month of April. So yes, there might be a curtailment in operations, but it's something that is planned. We re-accommodate these passengers on other flights, either on us or on other airlines. And it's not going to be a situation where passengers get a route shock when they come to the airport. So that's as far as this month is concerned. Now, we are now sitting down to look at what are the rostering norms or the rostering mechanisms or the rostering parameters which should be in place for May and beyond. And therefore, once we have clarity on that, sometime towards the middle of next week, we will then publish the rosters for the month of May. That might again see a curtailment because it depends on what kind of preference the pilots have and what kind of buffers we want to take. But at the end of the day, it will not be unplanned and last-minute disruption, which is the worst kind to have.